Good evening. It's Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, and this is the Bob Leonard Show. We'll be with you for about an hour, and we take the stories you've been watching on television and reading about in the newspaper this week, and we put our spin on it. We go behind the story and tell you what's really involved in the newspaper story or the television story. Now, like we tell you every week, it's only our opinion. You can accept or reject it, but obviously we're going to have our say. Now, if you miss this program tonight, Tuesday night, you can catch it tomorrow night. It's rebroadcast at about 11 o'clock to 12 o'clock. And if it's too late for you to stay up, it's also broadcast on a continual basis on flinttalk.com. So if you punch in flinttalk.com, and the programs will come up, pick the one you want, and it'll play for you for the hour you want to watch it. So anyway, we have a lot of things we want to discuss tonight, and one of the things that we'd like to do from time to time is go back to stories we've done to update you on them. What's happened with those stories? And first, let's talk about the story that everyone seems to be buzzing about, and that's the fiasco at Flint Southwestern Academy, where they allowed those young kids to play football when they were in jail. Now, since last week, and keep in mind, these stories started with about 2 weeks ago on a Saturday. Ron Fonger was writing this story. It says, from cell to field. That was the first story that they talked about that caused people to be very upset about. And here's another story where the football players back in the game. That was after the interim school boss suspended them and then rescinded her suspension. And then we have the third act here. Coach players off team. They even suspended the coach in this particular case. But anyway, now here's some of the story that we're talking about. Let's first play Channel 12's report on this.
Close to the team, says 17-year-old Tyrone Ward and 18-year-old Reginald Owens were suspended from the team today for the rest of the season. The two pleaded guilty to felony home invasion and spent the weekend in the Genesee County Jail, but through a diversion program, the pleas allowed them to attend school and to play in the game against Grand Blanc last week. There was word that the suspension had been reversed, but a source close to the team says the suspension stands. An attorney for the two says because of the program, Ward and Owens are not convicted felons. Jail records indicate the pair could finish their jail time sometime. Two football players from Flint Southwestern Academy will be allowed to stay on the team despite the fact they're serving jail time. The Flint School District has now reversed its decision to suspend the players from the team until an investigation is complete. 17-year-old Tyrone Ward and 18-year-old Reginald Owens pled guilty to felony home invasion and were sentenced to nights and weekends in the Genesee County Jail. Under the Home's Useful Trainee Act, they are allowed to attend school and school activities, which includes football. They did play in Friday's game against Grand Blanc. The teens will continue to serve their sentence. One Medicine's.
Now, he mentions the Home Youthful Trainee Act. That's a law that permits a judge to put people who come before him who have not committed any other crimes in the past, and this is it would be a nonviolent crime. They can put them on this youthful trainee status where they are on probation for a year, and if they successfully complete the program, that is, they get no further trouble, their records would be expunged, and the individual or individuals would be allowed to go free. Now, since last week when we gave you the inside story about this matter, and this was a story that no other news source was reporting, we told you that the 20-year felony was something that struck me as unusual. When there was a 5-year and a 15-year one, they could have charged him with and made the same sentence, but the prosecutor charged him the 20-year one. And the 20-year one indicates that the House that was broken into was occupied and or a gun was involved. So I found out that the house was occupied. What happened was the youngster who lived in the house with his parents came home when the burglary was transpiring, and these two people were in there stealing property of the homeowners. Now, the reason these guys got caught so fast was because the kid who came home recognized them. He's a senior at Grand Blanc High School, plays on the football team, and he knew who they were. And incidentally, all the parties here are African American, so those people who raise the issue of racism, you know, it's hard for me to see that it's happening here. So what happened is that the kid knew who they were, and as soon as they fled the house, he called the police, and they were apprehended a couple hours later. Now, he says that he satisfied in his mind that he saw a gun. Now, when these two were arrested, there was no gun found. So, you know, they had time to discard the gun if, in fact, there was one. But you know, it's his word against their word if they claim there was no gun. So they weren't charged with the serious crime of carrying a weapon in the commission of a felony, which would have required that they serve 2 years in prison, mandatory 2 years in prison. But here's the thing. Since last week, a new flurry of activity has been taking place, which further compounds the hypocrisy of this entire affair. This fiasco began when the adults who were responsible for setting the example for the students acted with confusion, inconsistency, unprofessionalism. You know, their bewilderment and even stupidity on how to handle this matter was mind-boggling to most people. Now, let me get to this one article here. You know, remember in the articles here that I showed you the headlines of, first they could play, and they did play in the Grand Blanc game. Then the superintendent says they can't play in any more games. Then after some pressure was exerted by certain members of the community, the public, like former Board of Education member Herbert Cleaves, she caved in and reversed her original decision and said they could play. Now, you know, this entire flip-flop all took place in a couple of hours at the superintendent's office last Monday. Since that time, a new act has been added to this three-ring circus. Here's the latest. Can you play that next tape, please?
Flint's Southwestern football team will not be on the field tonight. ABC 12 has learned Tyrone Ward and Reginald Owens have been suspended for the season, and Coach Gary Lee is suspended indefinitely. ABC 12's Dawn Jones is live at the high school now with these new developments on the story. Dawn?
Well, Larry, just moments ago, members of the Flint Southwestern football team left the school here. They loaded on a bus and went to tonight's game, and they did that without their coach and two of their players. Now, it was a week ago today that the Flint School District came under public scrutiny. That's when it was learned that two of the football players, Tyrone Ward and Reginald Owens, were serving a 90-day jail sentence in the county jail, but they were allowed out to play in last Friday's football game. This summer, before school started, Ward and Owens pled guilty to home invasion charges. The two were sentenced under the Home's Youthful Training Act, which allows juvenile first-time offenders to serve time and continue their education and extracurricular activities. The act also mandates that all the records are sealed in this case. Somehow, the information was leaked about the two players. We talked to Ward's attorney earlier today. He says he is very angry over these latest developments, and he says the suspensions were unwarranted and there could be legal ramifications for the Flint School District.
We are in the process right now of putting together a team of attorneys to look to see what legal redress these young men have. They've been put out in the public, and we believe in a false light, and we would ask that people bear with us and not be so judgmental until they know exactly what has gone on.
Now, in a written statement, the interim superintendent of Flint Schools, Linda Thompson, says, quote, in accordance with our policies, practices, and laws, we are not allowed to discuss student disciplinary matters or staff personnel matters in the news media. Now, the Flint Journal is reporting today that the athletic director here at the school, Albert Hicks, has also been suspended. We have not gotten that information confirmed. Coming up on ABC 12 News at 6, we'll hear what parents are saying, and we'll also...
Now, you heard that statement by the acting superintendent about disciplinary matters she doesn't discuss and shouldn't discuss. And here she appeared at the Rotary Club of Flint last Friday. She was a guest speaker, and the Rotarian asked her how she expected to drum up public support for the district given the football situation. Her comment was, the entire piece has turned into an adult feeding frenzy, which I will choose not to participate in. Thompson said, anything dealing with personnel issues and student disciplinary issues, we don't talk about publicly. There'll be a hurdle I will have to overcome. And then it says Thompson made the decision to suspend Lee as well as the players, and Lee is the coach, Reginald Owens and Tyrone Ward. So now, the public has a right to know, really not about the discipline or what the discipline was, but it seems to me they have a right to know if outside pressure, not sound school policy, caused her to change her mind. And then she wants to conduct her own investigation. The police and the prosecutor have already investigated the matter to the extent that the students pleaded guilty to a 20-year crime. It will appear from the Journal and the Channel 12's report that the school board had something to do with its latest change, coach players off team. And that was this past week. Now apparently the school board somehow is getting into it. The question that still hasn't been answered to our satisfaction is who made the decision that these young students could play in the game in Grand Blanc. We now know who said they can't play, the superintendent and the Board of Education, their last move on this. But who gave the go-ahead in the first place? It seems to me that Coach Gary Lee, who I've known for some time and respect, and he's a nice fellow, and he's been made the fall guy here. Do you really think Lee made this decision, play these kids in Grand Blanc, in the Grand Blanc game, without conferring with some higher-ups? I don't. Who gave the okay to Lee? If discipline is determined to be justified, the guy who gave the authority to Lee to play these young people, who authorized it, who could have stopped it, he's the guy that should be suspended, not Lee. The question of whether these two students should have been given Holmes Youthful Trainee status in the first place, considering they were charged with the most severe home invasion by the prosecuting attorney, 20-year max, because of the invasion involved an occupied home and a possibility there may have been a gun, appears now to only really be an academic question, since the judge has the authority to apply the trainee law, and he did it because he concluded that the two students fit the criteria. They had no previous record. Now, they've been sentenced under the law, and if you go back on the arrangement or the plea bargain, it could very well constitute a constitutional prohibition of double jeopardy. And maybe they have concluded, as Frank Manley says, that the failure to allow them to play football, they have gone back on the agreement. Now, having said this, my own opinion is Circuit Judge Jeff Nethercutt, he was a very, very good judge, and he's sensitive, and he's smart, and he's a disciplinarian, but he's reasonable. I think his decision to apply the home youthful trainee status to these 3 young people was proper and appropriate, considering they fit the legal criteria. Now, with this in mind, does all this fanfare being bandied about defeat the real purpose of the homes trainee law? And that's to try to return these young men to the community without the stigma of a criminal record. Unfortunately, even if they successfully complete the terms of their probation, and under the law, there is no further violations within a year, and the case is dismissed and the record expunged, this hue and cry surrounding the case may never go away. The stigma may stay with them all their lives, even if the case is dismissed. Some people say, well, so be it. They created the problem. Yeah, all these kids who were put on youthful trainee status, whether it's these 2 people or somebody else before or after them, they all deserve a kick in the pants, and they get it. This brings me to my final observation in this matter. The great tragedy in this whole affair is the adults' decisions. The Southwestern school officials, the superintendent of schools, hey, they dropped the ball here. The result is these youngsters that deserve to be penalized for their wrongdoing, as I say, and they were. They were put on probation for a year. They're serving 90 days in jail. Now they've now become the victims. They've lost the possible positive impact that the home's youthful trainee status intended to grant these 2 students by being put on the program. They've lost their anonymity. They'll bear this scar permanently for their indiscretion that the law intended to erase, all because of the involved adult stupidity. If the adults in control of these events had not allowed these 2 students to play, and they had the authority not to allow them to play, these youngsters would not have been ostracized and condemned the way they are being now. This case in this manner would not have seen the light of day. And if these kids had successfully completed their 1-year probation, and the case was dismissed, leaving no criminal record, then life would likely have been, their life would have most likely been spared the shame and the disgrace that's going along with it now. All because these adults in the schools and the school system and whatever said they could play. The judge didn't say they could play. The judge just said they could participate in extracurricular activities. He didn't say they could play football. But the school system, who has the power to discipline, that was not taken away from them by the judge, allowed them to play. Some people blame the judge. The judge didn't say they could play football. He just said they could participate. They could participate in extracurricular activities. The school was the one that was responsible for making that decision. Well, anyway, I suppose these youngsters will not be playing again, and apparently the Ward youngster, and I don't know too much about the other fellow, was being looked at by some Division I schools like Michigan State as a potential wide receiver. I think he's probably lost that opportunity, and you know, there's no one to blame but himself, but it's unfortunate anyway. Let me update you on the Career Alliance criminal investigation that we've been talking about too. You know, Career Alliance is one of the 20 similar state tax-funded organizations that are directed to initiate training programs for underemployed and unemployed people in each of these 27 communities where they have these types of programs, so that these citizens each who participate in these programs can maybe find jobs that will pay them a living wage. That's the whole idea of the program. Career Alliance receives about $20 million each year from the state and federal government, and then they also receive from time to time some money from private foundations. Now, the State Labor Department has been looking at this Flint Career Alliance program for a while now. They have some doubts about the effectiveness of the program and the possible misuse of some of the $21 million they receive every year. So what happened is, recently the State Labor Department conducted an investigation and concluded there may be some illegality going on in the local Career Alliance agency, excuse me. As a result, the Sheriff's Department began a criminal investigation in alleged specific wrongdoing having to do with a fraudulent purchase of an alleged unnecessary telephone system in Career Alliance, costing over $170,000. Now, the sheriff's investigation centers on, you know, among other things, the secret purchase of this alleged unnecessary phone system from a company involved with the executive director's son, who has a different name than Loving. We told you about this on this program. We gave you the name of the individual at that time, and apparently it's a son from a former marriage. The result is that they feel that he made some money that wasn't justified, and you know, the system was, they've concluded, may not have even been needed. At least the people in the Career Alliance who use the system say it wasn't needed. Now, since that time, Loving has in effect been terminated by the agency, which is the board of directors, or the workforce they call themselves, but it's a board of directors. Now, also under scrutiny is misuse of agency's credit cards, possible illegal laundering of payoff money from monies provided to the agency from taxpayers' dollars. They're looking at misuse of budgeted dollars for travel and conferences. In fact, one travel $2,000 charge was sending a custodian to a conference. What would you send a custodian to a conference to learn? $2,000. And then they're also looking at the conflict of interest between members of the agency's board of directors or workforce and the agency itself. You know, throughout the Labor Department's inspection that found many of these wrongdoings, the board of directors of the Career Alliance constantly offered their cooperation, especially in their press releases. However, as soon as the sheriff began his criminal investigation into the agency's activities, all the talk of cooperation went down the drain. This cold shoulder of this public agency to the sheriff, public law enforcement agency, caused him to have to go to court and obtain a search warrant for records of a public agency that should have been given to him without the need of that. But they refused to give it to him. He went and asked for it, and they said, no, we're not going to show you. You know, it was a sad day to see pictures of in the Flint Journal and on TV of a sheriff's truck and trailer parked in front of the Career Alliance building, and officers carrying out cabinet files, computers, and boxes of documents because of this public agency's refusal to cooperate. You know, what are they hiding that they didn't want the law enforcement agency to see? Now, I'm told that the files the agency didn't want to give up to the sheriff that was obtained through the search warrant held a treasure chest of evidence that may soon bring some high official down. That's what I'm told. Now, the latest wrinkle in this bizarre case is a new search warrant was issued last Thursday on former Executive Director Pam Loving's own home, and she lives in University Park. Now, the interesting thing was that this search warrant was executed by both local and federal agents. Now, this most recent raid on Loving's own house is kind of an ominous predictor of things to come as far as Loving and the people that work up there are concerned. You know, when the raid is conducted by both federal and local officials, someone is going to go down. Now, we'll keep an eye on this for you, and as events unfold, we'll bring them to you. But anyway, you know, remember about 2 years ago when the city council members illegally paid themselves retroactive pay in violation of the state constitution. Thereafter, they were ordered to pay the money back by the state attorney general. 4 of these 9 people on that council at that time refused. And to this day, each one owes about $18,000 to the city coffers. This is money that belongs to the taxpayers of Flint. Those refusing to pay our former 2nd Ward Councilman Ed Taylor, he was defeated in the last council race. Former 3rd Ward Councilman Johnny Coleman, he was defeated in the last election. And then also present 5th Ward Councilwoman Carolyn Sims. And then we had former Councilman Mark Horgan. He hasn't paid anything back. He chose not to run in the last election. Now, since these 4 refused, the Attorney General has brought a civil action in court to get the taxpayers reimbursed. A judgment was entered against these 4 in circuit court, but they still haven't paid the money back. You know, you have to be a little critical of the Attorney General and the Flint City Attorney for not enforcing this judgment against these 4 long ago. They could have done it by attaching their property or guaranteeing their bank accounts or wages or monies that they may be receiving. And they didn't do it until now. Just this week, we went to see them and made another inquiry of the Flint City Attorney on the state's cases on what they're doing about it. The City Attorney has assured me they were working with the Attorney General to enforce the 4 judgments against these deadbeats. They said that the City Attorney said they expect to bring a appropriate action soon. You know, I'm sure you recognize that these 4 former and present council members will never pay these illegal retroactive payments if they haven't paid it by now, unless someone brings them into court kicking and screaming. You know, they really show little respect for other people's rights or even a court order. I say let's do it. Let's bring the action. Let's get it done. Let's get the money back. It belongs to the taxpayers. Otherwise, the taxpayers will never see this money. We'll keep watching this to make sure that the Attorney General and the City Attorney stay on track in this case. Here's another update on, in regard to in this case, the regional emergency medical system and how it's breaking down and it lacks centralization and coordination of controls from 911 alerts. And also to the failure of ambulance services to respond promptly. They either don't respond at all, or they're tardy, or the people who are responding are poorly trained. And you know, sometimes this poorly trained person unnecessarily exposes patients to sometimes the dubious chances for survival. Here's an example of what I'm talking about here. County response too slow. This really tells you a lot about what's going on here. Here's what, I'll just read you a few little lines of this thing. It says, a private ambulance company with bases in Fenton, Flint, and other parts of the county has landed on probation because of what regulators say is a pattern of delayed responses to emergency calls and other dispatching issues. Now, this is kind of the interesting part here. The County Medical Authority, that's the group that's supposed to oversee the ambulances that operate in the county. There's 10 companies that operate in the county. It says the medical authority put the company on probation in July for 6 months after seeing, quote, a pattern of delay responses to calls over more than 2 years. What in the world did they take 2 years to act on this? You know, the first failure to respond that should have been enough. Then it goes on to say, county health officials have generally been unhappy with responses times in several parts of the county. The fellow who's in charge, a fellow by the name Trevithick, would not discuss details of what caused the probation, but said from January 2005 until May 2007, 15 of the 17 allegations of delayed response and dispatching trouble against the company were found to be valid. 2005, January to May of 2007. These people were supposed to be providing services that meant life and death to some people. And it took them 2 years to act when they saw the problem beginning 2 years ago. It says medical control doesn't track response times for individual ambulance companies, only by region, and only samples response times once each year. Can you believe that? Once a year they check these guys out. What is this medical control board supposed to be doing here? It says, in the case of the regional EMS, Emergency Medical Service, Trevithick said the company had too many instances in which there appeared to be confusion between the dispatchers with the company who are located outside the county and those in ambulances trying to find their way to calls. 2 years? Come on. Trevithick said he wasn't aware of any single delay by regional EMS rigs that resulted in specific problems for patients. Well, did he check it? I mean, this is crazy. Listen to this, a commentary. The county's overall ambulance system remains in a state of long-term limbo. What's that mean? People are dying. And then it says a report commissioned by the county recommended a single ambulance company be responsible for all patient transports in the county. But the County Board of Commissioners are yet to make any such decision. Now, let me tell you what's behind that. This is all politics. They got 10 companies. They all have friends on the County Board of Commissioners. Clearly, all the evidence that this consultant came up with showed that in communities where you have one ambulance service, the response time is much less. Very few, if any, problems at all like they're having here now with the other 10 agencies or the 10 ambulance companies. But because of the political pressure they're putting on the commissioners, they're more willing to respond to that political pressure than saving lives. Testing by the Control Medical Authority and the Flint Journal in 2004 showed ambulance companies haven't always staffed bases as they promised. You know, why are they still operating these? This is the first ambulance company they took off on, and it took them 2 years. What about the other ambulance companies that aren't manning their stations? They're supposed to be. You know, these stations are supposed to be spread out all over the county so that if an emergency comes in, say a cardiac arrest, that person has 5 minutes to survive in most cases, or at least until there's serious brain damage. The County Board of Commissioners could fix this. They haven't done a thing in the 2 years. We brought a case to you that showed an ambulance being called to a home in the north end of Flint, where a husband called that his wife was having chest pains, had all the symptoms of a heart attack. It took him 1 hour to get an ambulance there, and it came from Swartz Creek. When they got the wife in the ambulance and the man sitting in the front seat with the driver asked him, "How do I get to the hospital, the closest hospital?" What kind of response is that? Unfortunately, the poor woman died on the way to the hospital in the ambulance, and the emergency room doctors told her husband if she could have got there 5 or 10 minutes earlier, they probably could have saved her. Now, this is a direct result. This woman died as a direct result of the incompetency, the lack of response by these ambulance companies that the County Board of Commissioners appears to be protecting. Now, this story I just read you the problem seems to be addressing the Out County area. Now, the Out County, and I can say without contradiction, the problem with the ambulance service in the city is many times over what it is in the county. That's because there's a basic racism built into this. These ambulance companies don't like to go into the African American community. Why are we allowing that to happen? You know, for all intent and purposes, the paramedic services that the sheriff provides the county saves lives. The paramedic versus the ambulance. The paramedic has districts they drive around in. And they are the first responders, and their job is to get there within 5 minutes of any call that comes in from a home in that or a business in that district. And they can get there in 5 minutes. But the ambulance has to follow up, and that's where we're having the problem. Now, the sheriff department's paramedics have territory, as they say in the county, that allows the sheriff's paramedics to respond to any emergency call within each of those territories or districts in 5 minutes from the farthest place in the district. Now the sheriff wants to provide the same service to the city. You know, here's the thing. In a cardiac arrest attack, that's where the heart stops beating. The sheriff paramedic can attend the patient within 5 minutes. That's the rule of thumb. The national standards says a paramedic must be able to respond within 6 minutes of a cardiac arrest, because even the paddles they use to revive them, the patient will not prevent brain damage if the response is 6 minutes or more. That's in most cases. In the city of Flint, for all intent and purposes, there is no such protection for the residents that they have in the county. While the sheriff was supposed to set up a system for the city that parallels the successful county plan he has, by January 1st, 2008, the county board budget constraints seem to be putting the plan in jeopardy. It's hard for me to believe and to understand what is more important in providing a government service when you have a multi-million-dollar county budget than saving lives. You know, such an indifference about lives of people in the city, as reflected in the low priority to saving city residents' lives, smacks of, as I say, an institutional racism. The fellow who runs 911 for the city told us, when we interviewed him on this matter about 3 years ago, that he has trouble getting ambulances to go to certain areas in the city. And he pointed them out on a map, and they were all the African American communities. And he said the reason they do is they think they're afraid to go into the areas, or the people may be poor and they won't have money to pay the ambulance service. I said, get rid of them. This company is apparently still working in the city of Flint. The one they couldn't get to save this woman's life that I mentioned to you. They had to go to Swartz Creek. They had to call 911 in the county to get an ambulance from the county to come into the city. You know, what bothers me most is the lack of concern on the Flint City Council's part to this, imminent danger that the city residents face without a more responsive paramedic program. You know, you hear nothing from them. They seem to be more interested in muddying the Flint Mayor Williams' chances for re-election. You know, this lack of concern by all public officials in the city and the county to create a system our citizens' lives need, it's very disturbing. Where's the outrage on their part? On the city council's part? You never hear anything about them. You know, another problem that puts citizens' lives in jeopardy in both the city and the county is the lack of coordination in finding and dispatching the closest ambulance for an emergency. The 911 calls a base. Maybe there's no answer. Maybe the base has an ambulance out. Then you have to call another place. Then you have to call another place. While the paramedics in the county are out there and they keep the person alive, you still got to get them to the hospital fast, and you need an ambulance to follow up quickly. You know, the county commission chairman, Archie Bailey, who's been promoting the concept of better ambulance service for the city and the county and paramedics for the city and county, he came to the city council about 8 months ago, I was there, and told the council that the problem of lack of coordination had been solved. He said everyone had agreed, both the city and the county 911 system, that a new 911 system was being established for the purpose of having one independent 911 dispatching system so you know where the ambulances were, who was available. Now, here's what the Journal said. EMS reform, latest ambulance flaw boasts case for change. It says, in fact, all Genesee County ambulances would be, this is the recommendations of the consultant, and they say, in fact, all Genesee County ambulances would be directed by a single 911 center handling emergency calls only, a vast improvement over the current communication system that has 911 dispatchers talking to private ambulance bases via landlines with that information relayed to rigs on the road. The 911 would contact the ambulance directly and dispatch it, is my understanding. And if you had only one ambulance company, you could do it so much more efficiently. But remember the politics. And it went on to say, however, until the County Board of Commissioners puts this and other system upgrades in place, it has to improve things the best it can. That is, if you have this single 911 system. And it says, the county has faced for the past several years with a loosely organized network of private ambulance companies, currently 10, and the sheriff and fire department provide paramedics. With no strong central authority setting response standards and other controls, the county is saddled with a subpar service that compromises care. Now, here we have this where Bailey comes in and he tells the city council that the problem of lack of coordination has been solved. He says everyone is on board, got both 911 system. They're going to establish a 911 system that would be just for emergency services, and the 911 system would have control and contact with the ambulances and the dispatchers from these ambulance services. But just think if we only had one ambulance service and the 911 could call them, and they have these systems in ambulances now where they can look at a board and see where the ambulance is any place in the county and which is the closest one and dispatch that. That's possible. That's being done in many cities in the country, and we have not done it here. When such a program is essential and is feasible, it would save lives. They say, well, we don't know if any lives have been lost. Well, I showed you one that was, and I'm sure there are others. Now, this idea sounds like a good idea, but nothing came of it. We're still waiting, and people are dying. And that's not an exaggeration. I mentioned that one case. So as you can see, the ambulance system and the paramedic, at least in the city of Flint, is dysfunctional. It seems to me even the county commission representing the city have become indifferent to the problem. We never hear anything from them about making the system more responsive. They're the ones that can do it. They should be over there raising hell about this, because they represent the city. Where's Stanley? Where's the other county commissioners from the city? Where are they? You don't hear anything from them. That's unfortunate. Now, let's see here. Here's another example of a political misrepresentation of an event that clearly is intended to mislead the public. Now, this city councilman's cover is his belief that no one will check the facts and challenging him on what he says. But we don't operate that way. We check what he says, and if it's not true, we'll tell you. Now, here's Channel 12's report on this incident, and I'll tell you when that finishes the story behind the story, after you see what it is. It's hypocrisy at its highest level. Play that tape, please.
Big question many are asking is, how did the city come so close to losing those funds? ABC 12's Kathy Schafferin live at Flint City Hall, where the so-called blame game is now underway. Kathy?
You know, the money that we're talking about, the $5 million, was actually set aside for business loans in Flint back in 2002, but the money was never spent, and it was scheduled to run out in just 4 days from now. So given this, the City of Flint City Council decided to endorse the mayor's plan that would save the money for 2 more years.
Any discussion?
With absolutely no discussion, the City Council put its backing to an administration plan to save the money for 2 years by transferring it to Citizens Bank and having the bank administer the loans for businesses. But the question remained for many on the council: how could $5 million for business loans go almost unused in 5 years?
If you remember, a couple years ago, the mayor said no 108 loans in this city anymore. There are crooks that get them. So the money hasn't been spent.
But the mayor's economic development director says that's not quite the case. She says Michigan's economy has been to blame.
Michigan, not just City of Flint, but Michigan as a whole, has the economy has struggled over the last 4 years. So as we're looking for larger economic development projects, when I say larger, typically $1 to $2 million community investments made by businesses, those haven't really been at our door.
No, it is the city's fault, because no other community is going to have to give this money back. They've spent it. They're asking for more.
Now, while they disagree on how they got to this point, there's one thing on which both sides agree, and that is with the money being administered by Citizens Bank, they are very hopeful that this $5 million in business loans will be paid out and businesses will be using it within the new 2-year deadline. Reporting live at Flint City Hall, Kathy Schafferin, ABC 12 News.
Now, here's what, this meeting was yesterday, Monday, and it says, the Journal had a little brief story in yesterday. It says, City Council will meet today to save federal funding. A plan to hold on to $5.2 million in federal funding is on the agenda today for the Flint City Council special meeting. The money could go to local business loans if a restructured loan program is approved, city officials said. If the program is not approved, the funds will go back to the federal government. Now, the unfortunate part is Channel 12 got Scott Kincaid to respond, and really, that was not the best person to respond in this whole thing, in my opinion, because of all the problems that he has with this $5,200,000. Here's the story behind the story. And like I say every time, I like Scott Kincaid, and over the years he's done a good job as city council, but he's so preoccupied now with getting even with Don Williamson that he loses his perspective on some of these things. And that's unfortunate, because he's a good city councilman. He's knowledgeable, one of the most knowledgeable people down there. He's been on the council for 20 years. Why he gets caught up in this, I don't know. You know, we're talking about $5,200,000 that was saved by this tardy action of the council. Was money. Listen to this. This $5,200,000 was part of near $7 million that was set aside by Mayor Stanley and the city council in 2003, when Scott Kincaid was president of the council, to give to this notorious Joe Giacalone to build a factory in the north end of Flint. Now, we've talked about this before, how ridiculous this was. Now, the irony here is, as I say, Scott Kincaid is now criticizing the mayor's office for not spending this money, was president of the council at this time and authorized this, that allowed this ripoff to go through. Now, the ripoff, what is it? They gave Joe Giacalone a commitment for a loan of $7 million. That was committed by Stanley and the city council headed by Scott Kincaid. This money was committed. And so here's a little sidelight. This money couldn't be used like Mr. Kincaid suggests because it was committed to this project to build this factory in the North End, which never was going to be built with Giacalone involved. They gave him $1,200,000 till this program found out about it. Now I know Giacalone because we put him in prison when I was prosecutor. I called the sheriff and said, "Sheriff, you know this guy. You were in my office when we investigated him. This guy never intends to build a factory. He's going to steal the money." And that was when we found out $1,200,000 had already been given to him by Kincaid's counsel and by the Mayor Stanley. Now, it's committed for this purpose. Now, can you believe this? In any kind of a situation, this is the biggest loan the city of Flint ever made. In all loans of this kind, the city of Flint always had an irrevocable line of credit, so that if the guy went belly up and he borrowed the money and couldn't pay it back, he was kind of insured by this line of credit. Irrevocable. You couldn't rescind it. They didn't have it in this case. They never asked for it in this case. Why didn't they ask for it in this case? Why didn't Stanley ask for it? Why didn't Kincaid ask for it? He was president of the council. Now, this money has been tied up in this commitment for Giacalone since the last few months. The city of Flint, the mayor and his people have been trying to get the HUD, Housing and Urban Development, to recommit the money to be allowed to use for other purposes. They just got that commitment. They just got that approval. It couldn't be used. So when Kincaid says, you know, we almost lost this money because they screwed around and didn't use it, he got it committed in 2003 without this irrevocable line of credit to a guy that he's got to know was a bad guy, a bad actor. Nobody checked his credit. Nobody did anything. I'm telling you, Fitch was in that case. Giacalone has been charged. 3 people have been charged in that case. And maybe others will be. And they're both, or all 3 of them are awaiting trial in circuit court for obtaining money and false pretenses, because he took that $1,200,000, we traced it, and he didn't use it in the factory in the North End of Flint to build a factory to hire unemployed. He used it to build his own, help his own building out there in Lennon. These people, including Scott Kincaid, never went up to look at the OK Plumbing site where this factory was supposed to be built, because nothing was done in 2 years until this investigation began. And he now complains that the mayor misused the money or didn't use it properly.